sedimentary basin, and I thought few things I need to clear, few terminologies you should know before I discuss this Rift Valley and all these type of basins. So one thing you should know, that the surface of the earth, you know that is consisted of the crust, asthenosphere, lithosphere, you have the idea. So the surface of the earth, or the crust, you can say, it can divided into three types, three main types. Okay, what are the these three types? These are the cratonic margins, and ocean basin. So what are cratons? What do you mean by cratons? Cratons means it's a technically or tectonically stable land. Okay, so it's a tectonically stable land with thick lithosphere root overlying anomalously cold mantle. सो क्रैटन का मतलब होता है जो स्टेबल होता है, ज़्यादा कुछ उसमें अर्थक्वेक नहीं आता है. सपोज मैं अभी अर्थक्वेक से ही एक्सप्लेन कर रहा हूँ कि दिस इज द मोस्ट स्टेबल कंडीशन, कोई चेंजेस नहीं होता है, दैट्स कॉल्ड क्रैटन. एंड व्हाट आर द क्रैटनिक मार्जिन्स? these are basically टेक्टोनिकली एक्टिव एरियाज. टेक्टोनिकली एक्टिव एरियाज का अभी मैं एक्सप्लेन देता हूँ. टेक्टोनिकल एक्टिव एरियाज मीन्स ये सब एरिया में अर्थक्वेक होता है. ठीक है, अभी के लिए ये समझो. मीन्स अगर मैं इसका लिटरल मीनिंग बोलूँ, दैट मीन्स द प्लेट मूवमेंट और टेक्टोनिक प्लेट मूवमेंट्स आर हैपनिंग इन दिस एरिया. ओके, सो वेरिएबली टेक्टोनिकली एक्टिव एरियाज ऑफ क्रस्ट is in between it's a tectonic margins are the, so this is our stable land, so that's the craton. This is the ocean basin, and in between the place is called the cratonic margin. Okay, so it's a nature between the thick crust of ocean craton and the relatively thin crust of ocean. So cratons are tectonically it's a stable condition. नो चेंजेस इन द, मतलब किसी हिस्सा वो नीचे चला गया, किसी हिस्सा ऊपर आ जाएगा, वो क्रेटन में नहीं होता है. क्रेटन इज द मोस्ट स्टेबल कंडीशन. लेट मी गिव यू वन एग्जांपल. लाइक वाराणसी, द गंगा रिवर इज फ्लोइंग बिटवीन द क्रेटन एंड क्रेटोनिक मार्जिन्स. ओके, इन वाराणसी द गंगा रिवर इज फ्लोइंग, वन साइड ऑफ द गंगा रिवर इज, और वन बैंक ऑफ द गंगा रिवर इज द क्रेटन, another bank or another side is the cratonic margin or the active land. Okay, so it's basically giving you the river, the Ganga river is flowing in between the cratonic and the active part. Okay, so ये समझ लो. And the ocean basins, so is variably tectonically they are active, and ocean basins means generally related with oceans and generally overlying hot mantle. So these are the three types of Earth's surface. So Earth's surface can be divided into these three classifications. Now, depending on craton or non-cratonic or oceanic, we can, or it's a simple concept. So depending on this simple concept, I can classify basins basically into four types. As for now, forget the last class. Okay, as for now, remember that it can be, जैसे कि मोटा मोटा हम लोग अगर क्लासीफाई करते हैं विथ आवर सिंपल नॉलेज, दैट इज इंटरक्रेटोनिक, पेरिक्रेटोनिक, मीन्स इंट्राक्रेटोनिक, पेरिक्रेटोनिक एंड इंटरक्रेटोनिक. सो इंट्राक्रेटोनिक मीन्स, इंट्रा मीन्स क्या होता है? विद इन ए सेम थिंग. सो इंट्राक्रेटोनिक मीन्स बेसिन फॉर्म विद इन द बाउंड्रीज ऑफ क्रेटन. क्रेटन के अंदर, inside of a craton, if you are having a basin structure, their basin is called intracratonic. बहुत simple है. What about pericratonic? So basins formed near or accreted to the margins of the craton is called the pericratonic. What are the example of pericratonic? Or give me an, if I ask that give me an example of pericratonic, that's the, then you will be calling that Bombay High. So Bombay High Basin is one of the example of pericratonic rift basin. Okay, and in case of intercratonic, that means the basin formed between the cratons and extending onto the oceanic crust. In between ocean and the craton is called the intercratonic. So intra is there, peri is there, intercratonic is there. Now what is another type is the oceanic. I have already discussed here that cratons रहता है, वो जो passive part होता है, stable part होता है, जिसमें टेक्टोनिकली ये एक्टिव नहीं होता है. क्रेटोनिक मार्जिन होता है जो एक्टिव होता है, एंड ओशनिक बेसिन होता है. सो ओशनिक बेसिन्स आर फॉर्म्ड इंडिपेंडेंट ऑन द क्रेटर्स, ओके, मोस्टली ऑन द ओशनिक क्रस्ट. ऐसे ओशनिक बेसिन फॉर्म होता है. सो ये बेसिन को मैं अगर टाइप बताऊं इसका, तो ये 4 टाइप में डिवाइडेड हो जाता है. यू कैन डिवाइड बेसिन्स इनटू 4 टाइप डिपेंडिंग ऑन आवर सिंपल नॉलेज. Okay, now intercratonic can be divided into like it could be rift, it could be sag basin. Okay, pericratonic can be divided into pericratonic rift. The example of pericratonic rift is Bombay High. Okay, or passive margin basin, foreland basin and thrust belt. Okay, broaderland basin, Transtensional basins, those are there. I am not complicating this part. Give me a minute, okay? Oi, ei kopata di na. Okay. Now the basin formed between the craton and the extending onto the oceanic crust is called the intercratonic basin. And this type of basin could be a passive margin basin, intercratonic passive margin basin, intercratonic accreted back arc basin, intercratonic accreted fore arc basin. So ऐसे classification, so inter classification ऐसे आया है. But what we are considering here, we are considering on the based of tectonically active setting, and according to them, the basins interbedding a basin can be classified into divergent setting, intraplate setting, convergent setting, transcurrent fault setting, and the hybrid setting. I have already discussed. Let's discuss one by one. First one is the terrestrial rift valley basin, and I am talking about basin in the divergent setting. So what do you mean by basin in the divergent setting? When the plates are moving away from each other, then you have the divergent margin. So in the divergent margin you are having a basin, it's called the basin in a divergent setting. Okay, so in that case what will happen? The first type is the terrestrial rift valley basin. Okay, so in case of terrestrial rift valley basin, these are very important. That's why I thought that इसको अच्छे से explain करना चाहिए. So what happened? Terrestrial rift valley basins को मैं अगर एक लाइन में बताऊं, if I want to explain this terrestrial rift valley basin, that rift valley basin you can consider, you have read host and graben, and yesterday I have already discussed that part, host and graben. So terrestrial rift valley basins mean they are talking about the host and graben. ये दिमाग में रखो. Okay, so rifts within the continental crust bounded between high angle normal faults are known like this. This is an example of half graben. Graben कैसे बनता है? Yesterday I have discussed. Okay, so this is our host, this is graben, this is another host. So host and graben ऐसे बनता है, and it can be classified, these terrestrial rift valley basins can be classified into 2 types. Okay, first one is the active, and second one is the passive. So what are the characteristics of the active rift? What are the characteristics of the passive rift? So I am talking about the rift and valley. So नाम में ही है, terrestrial मतलब on the surface, रिफ्ट एंड वैली कहाँ पे दिखता है? होस्ट एंड ग्रेबन में. वो जो रिफ्ट एंड वैली का स्ट्रक्चर होता है वो होस्ट एंड ग्रेबन में ही दिखता है, ठीक है, मोस्टली, और हाफ ग्रेबन में भी दिखता है. सो in case of passive rift, what happened, that extension which causes the basin to form, for that extension the basins are formed, that's a really unrelated, because it's a passive one. It's not related to the mantle plume, or it's not related to the triple junction. In case of active rift, what happened? It involves the crustal extension caused by the upward movement. ये लेकिन डिपेंड करता है. For the active part, it basically depends on the upward movement of the magma intrusion. So जो मेंटल प्लूम आता है और जो ट्रिपल जंक्शन फॉर्म होता है, इसके ऊपर ये डिपेंड करता है. The active one depends on mental plume and triple junction formation. Okay. And terrestrial rift valley basin may evolve into an ocean basin with continued rifting and drifting over a period of a few million of years. So what happened? This terrestrial rift valley basin, when I am talking, and in your last slide I have discussed, if you remember this, I am talking about the intercratonic or pericratonic basins. Rift basins are the common type of intercratonic or pericratonic basins. Okay, so in case of this terrestrial rift valley basins, it involved the ocean basin, and it actually continued rifting and drifting over a period of million of years. So up to million years means क्या होता है? ये होता रहता है. This process continuously changing the landscape, and this process continuously doing the rifting or drifting over a period of a few million years. Okay, so the common example of rift valley basin is the half graben. What is half graben? High angle extensional fault in one side and hanging wall deep slope on the other side. Okay, so most of the sediments are supplied by the hanging wall deep slope. So the footwalls curves supply localized fan conglomeratic deposits. So the basin may be of, this basin could be of tens of kilometer wide. Basin का मतलब ही होता है बहुत बड़ा बड़ा. Okay, and few tens of kilometer wide to few hundred kilometers. मतलब 500-600 किलोमीटर तक इसका width हो सकता है, और the diameter it could be. So diameter could be up to 500-600 kilometers. And terrestrial rift valley basin also involved, as I mentioned at the first statement of me, was that terrestrial rift valley basins, rift and valley basins, actually terrestrial rift valley basins are termed as, they are basically the host and graben. Okay, the example of terrestrial rift valley basin is the Bombay High. ये बहुत ही फेमस जगह है, फेमस basin है. Okay, so in case of proto-oceanic rift troughs, in this case इसका अलग सिनारियो होता है. What happened here? That the basin is flowed by new oceanic crust and flanked by young rifted continental margin. So here the oceanic crust is new, younger, because we are talking about the divergence setting. Magma comes out as lava and it's making new sediments both the sides. Okay, ऐसे करके निकलेगा ना, the one strip, second strip, ऐसे ऐसे रहता है. मतलब जो MORB बोलते हैं हम लोग, mid oceanic ridge basalt, those are basically formed here. Okay, and from here we can understand the paleomagnetic signatures and all I have discussed last time. So these are the incipient of oceanic basin flowed by new oceanic crust, and the flanking part will be the young continental margins. This type of basin indicates a transitional stage between terrestrial rift valley basin and passive margin basins. So here I want to explain what is passive margins, what are active margins. Okay, ठीक है. So देखो, ये तुम्हारा जो सिलेबस है ना, इसके लिए मेरीन जियोलॉजी का भी नॉलेज चाहिए. अब कितना मैं बैकग्राउंड देता रहूँगा. Okay, so let me tell you in a very short manner that what happened in the oceanic margins. Ocean margin में क्या होता है? So there are two types. First one is the Atlantic type. Second type is the Pacific type. So any ocean margins can be divided into Atlantic, write this down, Atlantic type and the Pacific type. Okay, so Atlantic type margin जो पहले discover किया था वो they have seen that the here the steadily subsiding areas with thick sequences of deposited sediments are happening. Okay, that is called, so मैंने क्या बोला, so what I have asked that, oh sorry, so जो मैंने बोला ये किसने मैसेज किया तुम लोगों में से, अबे क्लास के बीच में मैसेज मत करो. So Atlantic type margins are steadily subsiding areas with thick sequences of deposited sediments. What happened in the Atlantic side type margins कि यहाँ पे और सेडिमेंट का डिपोजिशन हो नहीं रहा है. एक लाइन पे मैं बताऊँ ऐसे करके रहता है. दिस इज द कॉन्टिनेंटल क्रस्ट और कॉन्टिनेंटल क्रस्ट ऐसे रहता है. ओके, एंड सपोज दिस कुड बी आवर ओशनिक क्रस्ट. दिस इज आवर ओशनिक क्रस्ट and above of which you have the continental ridge. ऐसे जनरली एक ओशन का स्ट्रक्चर होता है. सो यहाँ पे मेरा हो गया शोल लाइन और कोस्ट लाइन. देन दिस इज द कॉन्टिनेंटल शेल्फ. ओके, तो मेरा जो पानी रहेगा ना, पानी मान लो कि इस एक कोस्ट लाइन को ऐसे कर देता हूँ, थोड़ा सा स्लोप देता हूँ, और जो पानी रहेगा, लेट मी, ओके, सो जो पानी रहेगा ये पानी है. सो दिस इज द सी वाटर. ओके, एंड दैट्स द फ्लोर. इन केस ऑफ पैसिव मार्जिन, this is called the continental crust. This will be the oceanic crust. Okay, this rise type of structure is called the continental rise. ये होता है, ये मतलब मैं एक्सप्लेन करने जाऊंगा तो पूरा क्लास लग जाएगा. ठीक है ना. सॉरी, इस पोर्शन के कॉन्टिनेंटल राइज बोलते हैं जो थोड़ा सा ऊपर है. ओके, एंड इस पोर्शन को बोलते हैं जो स्लोप है, इसको बोलते हैं कॉन्टिनेंटल स्लोप. सो अटलांटिक टाइप इज ऑल्सो कॉल्ड द पैसिव टाइप. So these Atlantic type or passive type margins are originate through the breakup of plates or parts of plates, and a process that is still taking place today in the Atlantic at a speed of 2 to 4 centimeter per year. And the recent example of this is the Red Sea, and in connection with subsidence and deposition. So एक दो चीज़ याद रखो. मैं समझ रहा हूँ कि इतना कुछ बोल दिया तो अभी याद नहीं रहेगा. फॉर द पैसिव मार्जिन टाइप, पैसिव के मैं बता रहा हूँ. फॉर द पैसिव मार्जिन टाइप, व्हाट हैपन, it has a connection with the subsidence and deposition of sediments like this. This is called the passive margins. Now for the Pacific one, the second type, it's called the active margin. मैं थोड़ा सा बता देना मैं इसके बारे में. So for the Pacific type margin, the collision could be of the plate collision. Everything has been discussed using the plate tectonic theory. Collision could be of continental collision, continental oceanic collision, okay, between Pacific and South America, as for example. And in this case, faulting, shearing of sediments, volcanism, melting of the submerging lithosphere are characteristics of these colliding margins. So when the collisions are happening throughout, means throughout the cases, these active margins are formed, and these active margins, इसका क्या होता था, सब्सिडेंस होता था पैसिव मार्जिन के लिए. फॉर द एक्टिव मार्जिन एक चीज याद रखो, बाकी सब भूल जाओ कि एक्टिव मार्जिन that is also called the Pacific type margins, that is related with uplifting. So here the uplifted condition happened. So and this uplifted condition associated with the volcanism, okay, plus it could be associated with the faulting, earthquake तो रहता ही है, and other mountain building process जो continuously होता जा रहा है. So uplifted means, sorry, this uplifting condition is associated with generally volcanism, faulting and other mountain building processes which are still continuing, okay, and these characterizations are due to the tectonics. So I have classified active and passive according to the tectonics and the deposition, uplifting and the subsidence. Okay, so ये दो difference याद रखना. Try to remember these two difference between active and passive margins. So अभी कहाँ पे था हम लोग? We are discussing about the proto-oceanic rift troughs, and these rift troughs are one key point that you have to remember. बहुत सारी चीज़ें लिखा हुआ रहेगा, मैं notes दे दूँगा, but the main important point you have to remember that is the transitional stage. Let me write down the key points, that it is the transitional stage, write this down, between, it's the transitional stage between terrestrial rift valley basin, okay, TRV, okay, in between TRV and passive margin. I have already explained what do you mean by the passive margin, Atlantic type margin, okay, and मैं passive margin पे भी आता हूँ, ये भी एक basin है, passive margin basin, okay. So they form because it's a continuation of the Rift Valley Basin. It's a continuation of the Rift Valley Basin. ऐसा तो नहीं है होस्ट ग्रेवन हो गया और बाकी का जगह मतलब ये होस्ट हो गया. This is host, this is graben, and this is host. Then another graben is there, and इस जगह पे कुछ नहीं होगा. So this will be the transitional basin, this proto-oceanic rift troughs, okay. And this transitional basin will be in between the Rift Valley Basin, like rift and valley is there, and the passive margin, okay. The example of proto-oceanic rift troughs, it is Red Sea, okay. ऐसे होता है इसका स्ट्रक्चर जैसे मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया. Now basin in the intraplate setting can be divided into four types: intercratonic basin, passive margin, active ocean basin, dormant ocean basin. So in case of intercratonic basin, intracratonic means inside. I have already explained. Intracratonic basin means intercratonic basins occurs within the cratonic areas. So origin of this type of basin is controversial because of the stable nature of the craton. So I am saying it's a craton and you are saying that यहाँ पे basin है. How is it possible? So there are several theories out there. So it may be associated with the fossil axial rift in cases, and sometimes it can be classified as intercratonic basin. Remember that intracratonic basin. The first slide I have discussed that it can be divided into rift basin, or it can be divided into the Sag Basin, okay. So when I am talking about the interplate settings, then I'll be only considering the sagging part, okay. So what are the sagging basin, or what are the Sag basins? Sag basins are the broad, convex, okay, downward basins. That's called the intracratonic basin. Important, right? Okay. Example of the intercratonic basin is example of the Sag Basin is under the intercratonic basins are Bindhan Basin, Kallage Basin, Kadapa Basin. Last year someone wrote that Katappa Basin. Okay, so Katappa वो है जो बाहुबली को मारा था, और Kadapa एक जगह है साउथ इंडिया में, so it's called the Kadapa Basin. Don't do the same mistake. So it's a uranium basin basically. Kadapa Basin, Chhattisgarh. From our department, generally people visited this Kadapa Basin for field work. Okay, some of our faculties are doing research in this basin. So Kadapa Basin, then Chhattisgarh and Bihar, Bastar basins are belong. They are from these intercratonic basins. Now about the passive margins, I have already discussed what are the passive margins, and the passive margin basin. So passive margin basically representing the transition between the continent and an ocean. Okay, so here subsidence happening, and which is not an active plate boundary. So in this case, it represents a mature rifted continental margin at the continent oceanic interface. Passive margin, yes. पैसिव मार्जिन का अभी मैं दिखाया ना, ऐसे फॉर्म होता है पैसिव मार्जिन, लाइक दिस. देखो ये एक एक चैप्टर का हिस्सा है, तो मैं जितना शॉर्ट में हो रहा है ना मैं समझा रहा हूँ. अभी पैसिव मार्जिन का समझो, मैं ये सब छोड़ देता हूँ, मैं एक सिंपल तरीका बोलता हूँ कि पैसिव मार्जिन क्या होता है. सो व्हाट हैपन इन द पैसिव मार्जिन. पैसिव मार्जिन में what we learn, I have discussed, right? Atlantic type होता है क्या, पैसिव मार्जिन होता है. अटलांटिक टाइप जो मार्जिन होता है, दिस इज कॉल्ड ऑल्सो पैसिव मार्जिन. एंड इन दैट केस व्हाट हैपन, व्हाट जनरली हैपन, एक्चुअली सबसिडेंस होता है. आप किसी जगह नीचे आ जाएगा तो बेसिन फॉर्म हो जाएगा, तो पैसिव मार्जिन में ऐसे करके बेसिन फॉर्म होता है. ओके. And let me tell you one thing, that passive margins occur at every ocean continent boundary that is not marked. Okay. So passive margin where you can find every ocean continent boundary, you will be having passive margin. Okay. Now active ocean basin is there, dormant ocean basin is there in the intraplate setting. So what do you mean by intraplate? What do you mean by intraplates? Tell me, what is intraplate? No, intra means within. Intra means within. इंट्रा मीन्स इंट्रा स्टेट, मतलब होता है, मैं वेस्ट बंगाल की अगर बात कर रहा हूँ कि वेस्ट बंगाल की स्टेट के अंदर, ठीक है ना. इंट्रा क्रेटोनिक मीन्स होता है एक क्रेटन है उसके अंदर अगर कोई बेसिन रहता है, इंट्रा का वही मतलब होता है. सो देन एक्टिव ओशन बेसिन होता है, जैसे कि मैंने एक्सप्लेन किया एक्टिव ओशन कैसे फॉर्म होता है, उसके लिए अपलेटमेंट होता है एंड बेसिन्स आर फॉर्म्ड लाइक दिस. So Gulf of and this type of the example of the passive margin I didn't give you, that is the Gulf of Mexico is the largest dormant ocean basin under passive margin. Okay. Sorry, yes. Yeah. इंट्रा प्लेट मीन्स विद इन द प्लेट. हम लोग प्लेट कंसिडर किए थे ना प्लेट टेक्टोनिक में कि 12 मेजर प्लेट्स आर देयर, few minor plates आर देयर. प्लेट के अंदर जो बेसिन्स होता है उसके 4 टाइप्स है. इंटरटेक्टोनिक होता है, पैसिव होता है, एक्टिव होता है, डोरमेंट होता है. ओके अब क्वेश्चन पूछो फिर से, बोलो. हाँ यस. बेसिन, बेसिन माने की बेसिन. व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय बेसिन? What do you mean by basin? Basin is basically it's a large depression. मैं कैसे समझाऊँ? बेसिन मतलब एक समझ लो किसी वजह से एक गड्ढा हो गया और वो गड्ढा का तुम मान लो कि ये 600 किलोमीटर वाइड है. For some reason it happened. Okay, mostly for the tectonic activity like earthquake. सो अगर प्लेट के अंदर कोई गड्ढा हो जाता है, उस कोई एक में एशियन प्लेट ले लिया और यूरेशियन प्लेट ले लिया, विद इन यूरेशियन प्लेट यू हैव सम गड्ढा. ओके अभी यही समझो बेसिन. मुझे समझ में आ रहा है कि तुम लोगों को बेसिन का आइडिया नहीं है, मैं बताया था लास्ट टाइम पे. तो समझ लो कि एक बड़ा सा कटोरा बोलते हैं ना, बाउल. सो यू हैव लार्ज बाउल ऑफ 600 किलोमीटर वाइड. दैट्स इज योर बेसिन. सो व्हेन प्लेट के अंदर ही वो बेसिन फॉर्म होता है, दैट्स कॉल्ड द इंट्रा प्लेट सेटिंग. इंट्रा प्लेट सेटिंग का क्लासिफिकेशन है इंटरटेक्टोनिक बेसिन, पैसिव मार्जिन्स, एक्टिव मार्जिन्स, डोरमेंट बेसिन. ओके नाउ फॉर द बेसिन्स इन द कन्वर्जेंस सेटिंग, दिस इज वेरी मच important and I would like to describe this in means details. Okay, so first one is the trench. Why I am having trench in the convergence setting? Who can tell me? Why I am having trench in a convergence setting? First one. Tell me. Why I am having trench? I have already discussed the background, the plate tectonic theory. मैं इसको ड्रॉ करता हूँ convergence setting को. Okay, then you will get the idea. सो कॉन्वर्जेंट मीन्स क्या होता है? टेल मी. आप कॉन्वर्जेंट सेटिंग का मतलब क्या होता है? वन प्लेट सब साइड अनदर. ओके सो कौन सा प्लेट कॉन्टिनेंटल ओशनिक के हुआ तो ओशनिक प्लेट झुक जाता है और ओशनिक प्लेट नीचे चला जाता है. अप टू 700 किलोमीटर इट कैन गो. ओके so suppose up to 700 kilometer it can go at the depth, and I am drawing this is the our oceanic crust, oceanic plate. Okay, this is our oceanic plate, and here we have some continental plate at the top. Some continental plate is there, suppose like this. ऐसे ड्रॉ किया अभी. so what happened, यहाँ पे एक गड्ढा हो रहा है ना. There is a basinal structure here. It's called the trench. This is your trench. Okay. So what happened here? If this is the plate, there is a chance this continental side. So this is the oceanic plate, and this is the continental plate. So continental plate वो झुका नहीं, oceanic plate झुक गया. ठीक है. अब what happened? ये 700 किलोमीटर डेप्थ तक आ गया सपोज. सो देयर प्रेशर एंड देयर टेम्परेचर बोथ आर इंक्रीजिंग. सो अंडर प्रेशर एंड टेम्परेचर मेल्टिंग पॉइंट decreases, and you know that at that high temperature this portion will be melting. And ये melt, okay, what will happen? There might be some opening, and it generally create a volcanic arc. It's called. So from here the magma is going up and it's create a volcanic arc. So let me draw this. So finally this continental side में क्या होता है? Okay. So in the continental side what happened? So this is the trench. and suppose there is another plate is there, any plate is there like this. So this plate gets melted and it goes up, it's called the mantle plume, and it goes up like this and it creates a volcanic effect, or it creates the volcanism. Okay, so this is called volcanic arc. इसका भी बहुत सारे फंडा है कि volcanic, by seeing the volcanic arc we can also feel that, or we can also learn that the plate tectonic theory is real, the plate tectonic theory is, I mean plate movement is happening, that you can understand by seeing the volcanic arc. It could be one example. So first understand, first basin what we have encountered, that is the trench here. Okay, and this is the oceanic crust, and suppose this is the ocean floor up to this. ऐसे करके ड्रॉ कर दे, वो सीधा होगा, मैं ड्राइंग इतना अच्छा नहीं हुआ. So this is filled up with water. So first basin we are encountering here, that is your trench. I am talking about the convergent setting. Okay, means destructive boundary पे क्या होता है वो बात कर रहा हूँ. So in the convergent setting, first basin you will be encountering, that is called trench. So trench is, if I define trench, that is the elongated deep troughs formed on the subducting oceanic plate. It represents the deepest of the sedimentary basin. Tell me one example of trench. किसी को मालूम है ट्रेंच का कोई एग्जाम्पल? यस, मारियाना ट्रेंच, द डीपेस्ट पॉइंट ऑन अर्थ, 11 किलोमीटर डेप्थ है उसका, समझ रहे हो ना. और दिस इज द, ऐसे फॉर्म होता है एक्चुअली, मारियाना ट्रेंच भी ऐसे फॉर्म हुआ था ड्यू टू द प्लेट टेक्टोनिक्स, ड्यू टू द ओशनिक कॉन्टिनेंटल कोलिशन. मारियाना ट्रेंच हैज फॉर्म इन द पैसिफिक ओशन, आई थिंक. ओके, second type is the another type of basin, that is called the trench slope basin. So what do I mean by that? And it's called the volcanic arc. So trench slope basin is the local structural local means मतलब क्या, अपना घर का नहीं समझ लेना. Local means क्या होता है, when I say local that means वो बहुत ही छोटा साइज का होता है relatively to the regional. ओके, मैं अगर शिवपुर की बात करूँ वो लोकल हो गया. एंड इफ आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द होल वेस्ट बंगाल, देन इट विल बी द रीजनल स्टडी. ओके, अगर मैं बात करूँ कि शिवपुर कोलकाता एंड 24 परगना, देन इट विल बी योर लोकल स्टडी. ओके, सो लोकल का यही सेंस है. सो व्हाट डू आई मीन बाय दैट? लोकल स्ट्रक्चरल डिप्रेशन, ड्यू टू दिस देयर विल बी स्मॉल स्ट्रक्चरल डिप्रेशन फॉर्म on the subduction complex is called the trench slope basin. This type of basin you can see in the Andaman area. So here you will be having some depression, and that type of depression is called the trench slope basin. It's generally associated with the trenching part, but the most important, so trench is important here. Third point is, if I asked in your exam that write down the several basins in the convergent setting, then you might omit the trench slope basin, but this trench you have to write. Another important one is the 4 arc basin. So what is the 4 arc basin? So the 4 arc basin is the basin occur within the arc trench gap. So this is our trench, this is the volcanic arc. Okay, and this arc trench gap, there you are seeing a basin, and this basin is called 4 arc. ऐसे मैं एक्चुअली ऐसे करके डिनोट करता हूँ. So this basin is our 4 arc basin. It's the in between trench and the volcanic arc. Clear? Now the intra arc basin, so extensional back arc basin formed when the angle of subduction of the downgoing slab is steep and the rate of subduction is greater. So Let me first describe the back arc basin. What do you mean by the back arc basin? So in case of back arc basin, what happened? It's the oceanic basin behind the intra-oceanic magmatic and the continental basin. So दिस साइड में, इस साइड में जो होता है ये हो गया फोर आर्क, क्योंकि इसका सामने है। वोल्केनिक आर्क के पीछे जो रहेगा, जो बेसिन इसको बोलते हैं, दिस साइड विल बी मार्किंग एज ए बैक आर्क basin. Okay, so this type of basin forms in case of steep angle of subduction happen. So if what I have drawn here, that's the steep angle of subduction. In these cases generally you will have a basin like basinal structure like this. Okay, and this basin is called the back arc basin. This side of so example of back arc basin is in the Andaman Sea. Then retro arc foreland basin is there. These are the special types of basin. I'm not going to explain, just I'll send you the note, वहाँ से पढ़ लेना. Another type of basin is there that's very important, that is called the piggyback basin. Okay, so it's the 8th type, that is called the okay. So this is the see the trench ऐसे फॉर्म होता है. दिस इज द रेट्रो फोरलैंड बेसिन, बिकॉज फोरलैंड साइड में क्या होता है कि मतलब आफ्टर मैग्मेटिक आर्क, इसको मैग्मेटिक आर्क भी बोलता है, वोल्केनिक आर्क भी बोलता है, ठीक है, कन्फ्यूज मत होना. सो उसके बाद बैक आर्क कंप्रेशन होता है. आफ्टर बैक आर्क बेसिन के बाद वो रेट्रो फोरलैंड बेसिन भी डेवलप होता है. इट्स डेवलप पैरेलल टू द माउंटेन बेल्ट एंड इट हैपन व्हेन द स्टीप इज जेंटल. ओके, सो एक बेसिन यहाँ पे फॉर्म होता है, इज कॉल्ड द रेट्रो फोरलैंड बेसिन. सो दिस टाइप ऑफ बेसिन इज कॉल्ड रेट्रो आर्क फोरलैंड बेसिन बिकॉज इट इज पोजिशन बिहाइंड ए बैक आर्क बेसिन. सो बैक आर्क के पीछे आया, देखो ये देखो, ये मेरा सबडक्शन जोन है. ओके, सी हियर दिस इज द सबडक्शन जोन. सो यहाँ पे ट्रेंच होगा एंड above of which you have, if you see the 3D structure, these are the volcanic, मैं बोल रहा था ना, एक chain of volcanic arc बनता है. If you see it, and by seeing this you can also explain the plate tectonic theory that this volcanic arc are formed. अरे यार, अब जल्दी ख़त्म करना पड़ेगा. So volcanic arcs एक सीरीज होता है, एक चेन होता है, चेन से फॉर्म होता है. सो यू विल बी सीइंग द वोल्केनिक आर्क एज ए चेन. द एग्जांपल ऑफ वोल्केनिक आर्क चेन इज हवाई. इन हवाई यू विल बी सीइंग सेवरल वोल्केनिक आर्क चेन. ओके, और मैग्मेटिक आर्क चेन, whatever you want to say. In between that, in between you have the four arc basin. In behind of this magmatic arc we have the back arc basin. Where? Here. So this basin will be our back arc basin and this will be the four arc basin. This is the trench. Okay, one important basin, so retro foreland already discussed. One important one is the piggyback basin. So what do you mean by piggyback basin? This one, it's also called the satellite basin. It is the type of minor depression. Okay, and it's developed on the top of thrust sheet as a part of foreland basin system. So the basin is separated from the fourth deep by an anticline or syndepositional growth structure. It's called the piggyback basin, and sometimes you will find some petroleum deposition in this piggyback basin type. Okay, then remnant ocean basin is there. Foreland intermontane basin is there. I'm not going to discuss, like a remnant basin is there, foreland intermontane basin is there. बैक आर्क बेसिन तो डिस्क्राइब कर दिया, फोर आर्क डिस्क्राइब कर दिया. सो बाकी सब पढ़ लेना वहाँ से नोट्स से. सो दीज आर द इम्पोर्टेंट बेसिन स्ट्रक्चर इन द convergence setting. Now our fourth type was basin in the transform and transcurrent fault setting. Transcurrent means I'm talking about the strike slip fault. Okay, so it could be divided into three types: transtensional basin, transpressional basin, transrotational basin. So what happened in the transrotational basin? This type of basin is formed by rotation of cluster blocks about vertical axis. Transtensional basin, here what happened? The overlap. This is the key point. Overlap of two separate strike slip faults may create a region of extension which forms a pull-apart basin like this. Strike slip मतलब क्या होता है? What happened? ये एक block है. Let me explain. This is one block, means one plate, and this is another plate. This plate moves this direction, this plate moves this direction, and they form such a basin, they form a overlapping. Due to this overlapping, there might be a gap. You are seeing this yellow colored gap here. It's called the pull-apart basins, and this is a type of the transitional basins. Transitional basin is the basin forms in a localized zone of compression along with a strike slip fault system. So when I am talking about the transform and the transcurrent fault setting, that means I am talking about the strike slip fault, okay? And this type of basin is formed rotation of the cluster block about the vertical axis. So when the cluster blocks rotates around a vertical axis, then this type of basins are formed. Okay. Now our fifth type of basin classification is a basins in hybrid setting. Hybrid setting means it's consisted of not any plate margin, not a single plate margin. It consisted of several setting is there. Okay. First one is the Euler-Cohen. ये spelling करना मतलब बोलना भी दिक्कत का बात है. Euler-Cohen. Okay. So this Euler-Cohen is it is a failed arm of three rib system like this. Okay. This is the continental crust. This is the oceanic crust system. This is the ongoing spreading is happening in this direction. And this is the failed ribbed. Yes, it's a failed ribbed system. Ribbed बनते बनते रहेगा and Euler-Cohen बन गया. So Euler-Cohen, it is a failed arm of three-armed rib system, two of whose continue to evolve to form ocean basin. ये सब इतना important नहीं है तो मैं इतना seriously ले भी नहीं रहा हूँ, ठीक है. लेकिन एग्जाम में आएगा तो तुमको लिखना होगा. Extend from the margins toward the interior of the craters, and this basin is wider near the sea and narrows down towards the land like this. Okay. So it's called the failed ribbed Euler-Cohen in RRR ribbed setting. So remember the triple junction. Okay. Now intracontinental range basin is there, impactogene is there, successor basin is there. So these are the types you will be reading from that note. I'll be providing. Okay. After that, इसमें किसी का कोई क्वेश्चन है अभी पूछ सकते हो. If you have any question, just ask me. Do you have any question, anyone? मीर थोड़ा पढ़ लेना इसको, समझ में आ जाएगा. नहीं आया तो मैं इसको फिर से एक्सप्लेन करूँगा, ठीक है ना. अगर नहीं आता है तो मैं फिर से एक्सप्लेन करूँगा. जो इम्पोर्टेंट है, जो मुझे चाहिए ना, वो मैं एक्सप्लेन कर दिया. मतलब जो मैं डिस्कस करूँगा बाद में, दैट आई हैव एक्सप्लेन, वो नोट को मैं भेज दूँगा. आज पढ़ लेना और उसके बाद अगर समझ में नहीं आता है देन आई विल डिस्कस. ओके. नाउ लेट्स काम के बात पे आते हैं, ठीक है. दैट वाज द थ्योरी. नाउ लेट्स डिस्कस द सिनेरियो केस स्टडी related to India. So what are the petroleum basins of India and how they are classified? Now I will be discussing that only. So globally more than 600 basins are identified, among which 400 basins are hydrocarbon, they are active for the hydrocarbon explorations. See here. Among 400 basin, I am talking about the basin, not site. ये इसको गलती मत करना, basin अलग चीज़ होता है. So about 180 basins are under commercial production, and the ultimate resources of the world is 620 billion tons estimated. but the interesting fact is that 85% of the reserves confined only in 30 basins. समझ रहे हो क्राइसिस कहाँ पे है, ठीक है. बाकी सब में रहेगा तो अभी हम लोग एक्सट्रैक्ट नहीं करेंगे बिकॉज दैट माइट नॉट बी प्रॉफिटेबल. So in case of sedimentary basin of India that occupy, not OCCPY क्या लिखा हुआ है, so the sedimentary basins of India basically occupy an area of 3.5 million square kilometer. These are some informations, and the 4% of the world sedimentary area. So only our whatever reserves I'll be talking about, only the 4% of the world sedimentary area. हम लोगों के यहाँ उतना होता कहाँ है, हम लोग तो इंपोर्ट करते हैं, यूक्रेन से ले रहे हैं, इजराइल से इजराइल बोल रहा हूँ, सऊदी से ले रहे हैं, ऐसा करके हम लोग इंपोर्ट करते हैं ना क्रूड ऑयल को. सो दिस मिलियन एसके मीन्स मिलियन स्क्वायर किलोमीटर. ओके, so 0.3945 million square kilometer in the offshore, 1.39 million square kilometer in on land, and this for amount in on land and shallow waters up to 200 meter isobath. Isobath means this is not iosbath, this is the isobath. इतना गलती कैसे हो गया. isobath का एक मैं एग्जांपल देता हूँ. We generally use contours to denote the depth from the mean sea level. That is considered as isobath. For you, this should be enough. Means isobath means same contour line, मतलब इस contour का जो depth होगा वो same होगा, like 25 किलोमीटर, sorry 25 किलोमीटर होगा, 250 meter let's say. Okay, and then I'm drawing another contour, and that contour is giving you the depth of 200 meter. So these lines are called isobath. So of the water means water thickness along this contour is same everywhere. Okay, water thickness along this contour is 250 meter. Okay, it's called the isobath line. So of the 26 petroliferous basins of India, 15 are interest of the hydrocarbon exploration. So we have identified 26 basins, among which 15 are commercially good enough. So मैं उस दिन बोल रहा था कि ONGC ने कौन सा ब्लॉक यहाँ पे डिस्कवर करा. So ONGC has been surveying around 10 years, more than 10 years, around 15 years. Okay, in the Murshidabad, Malda, North Chobis Pargana area, and they have found recently they have found a site, okay, which can produce commercially for oil, which can produce the crude oil site. They found that is that's in Ashok Nagar in North Chobis Pargana. किसी को मालूम है अशोक नगर नॉर्थ 24 परगना में? So they are near ना. So there they have found this petroleum reserve. न्यूज़पेपर में भी आया था, तुम लोग देखे होगे कि नहीं मालूम नहीं. उससे पहले हम लोग जानते थे कि ना ये बेंगल बेसिन है ना, ये बेकार है, इसमें कुछ नहीं हो सकता है. देयर इज ए पोटेंशियल. एंड मैं ये स्टोरी क्यों बोल रहा हूँ कि कुछ नहीं हो सकता है, क्या है इसका कुछ क्लासिफिकेशन है. लेट्स discuss that points. So there are total 26 sedimentary basins in India of 3.14 million square kilometer, and it can be classified one category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so deep water is the 5 one. मैं उसको बाद में डिस्कस कर रहा हूँ.